Hey everybody, I'm Joe Stevens, certified financial planner. And today I have a great guest, Steven Nasiatka. Steven has a really interesting story that I'm excited to learn more about today. So thanks for joining, and let's just open it right up. Steven, you got a pretty cool story. You actually made the reverse switch as me. You started out in the finance world and then went to the wine world, and I did the opposite. Take me back to the beginning, man. Tell me a little bit about how this all started.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, Joe. I would say reverse-ish. And first and foremost, thanks for having me on today. I definitely appreciate it. Looking forward to this. It's always fun to share some stories and bring more folks into the world of wine, which clearly is an amazing thing, as I know you appreciate as well. So yeah, I think what's been interesting for me is, yes, as you said, I started on the finance thing. I also say reverse-ish because I am still fairly involved in different ways in the finance and related communities, although much more heavily focused these days on the wine side of the house. So, most of my career was in professional services, whether it be at KPMG on the audit or accounting advisory side, with a stint in the middle at Siemens, corporate finance, but really that was also in a more consulting type role to a smaller firm locally in Newton, Mass, of about 20, 25 people, where again, really heavily focused on customer service. And during that time, I was actually invited to a wine tasting from a good friend of mine who was also involved in some of the international wine and food societies that I'm a part of. And interestingly enough, I've been to, which is not surprisingly, to a number of wine tastings, whether it be at wineries, hosted in people's homes, restaurants, etc. And some of the in-home ones have been less than stellar, I guess you could say, where, you have somebody who is selling wine and they're trying to make a quick buck, they're doing their thing. You show up and you realize it's a friend, it's a family member, you're trying to help them, but then you actually try the wine, and it's definitely not something that, other than a courtesy type buy that day, and maybe cooking wine at best that you use it for later, that you do. This was the opposite of that, right? So I was greeted, I was actually the Boisset wines, and the first one that I had was the number 69 Cremant de Bourgogne, number 69 for the year of the man on the moon, the year of date of birth of the owner, and of course nothing else beyond that. But interesting with the wine is just the quality for the price point. A lot of folks, especially sommeliers, will strongly suggest go for something other than champagne, and there are so many Cremants and so many other sparkling wines out there that are absolutely fantastic and certainly at a different price point, and that's what this was. So this was a sparkling rosé, and when I found out that it was in the $30 price point, I was just floored, basically. So that was the first wine. The host then continued to go through 5 or 6 other wines, and it was very much a similar thesis where quality to price was across the board through the roof. And so at the end of it, as I was thinking through, of course, I'm happy to buy those wines. That's not just the courtesy buy, that's buying for something I'll actually consume. But there was also the opportunity and ability to basically be a sales rep for the company as well. 1099, completely flexible, do as little or as much as you want. And I was just thinking through the nature of my network, which is many CEOs, CFOs, board members, companies that I've helped bring public before in the past, whatever it might be, who, unlike the broader population where there certainly are some declines in wine, certainly those folks are still wine enjoyers, maybe more so on the drinking less but drinking better, which is not a bad trend in many cases as well. And so I said, this is interesting. Not only is there the opportunity to do what I'm doing, but also to expand the wine to that network as well. And interesting, if you think about it, if you're selling professional services, or if you're selling wealth management services, or whatever it might be, right? You go to somebody and you talk about that. Somebody may have that immediate need, but the reality is they may not, or they're not thinking about it, or they don't want to talk about it, whatever it is. If you talk about wine, very different story, right? People want to talk about wine. People can, in some way, shape, or form, associate and identify with it. Even if it's the folks that absolutely hate wine or whatever it might be, just like the CrossFit folks, they're going to be happy to tell you just how much they hate wine. So either way, you get engagement, and then once you get engagement, you can kind of transcend that beyond into whatever conversation. And so I'm doing a lot more with it now. That was my initial transition point into wine after many years, of course, realizing that it is fun for BD, for business development.
Yeah, cool. I love it. So keep taking me down that road a little bit. You're kind of leaning in now. You realize the private events at people's houses are just unprofitable. Then you lean into your network, and I'm following you. You're a busy guy, man. So take me down that road a little more. Tell me more about how it's going, how it's working, how you're continuing to grow.
Yeah, so I think what was interesting there, of course, and as you as a financial advisor would suggest, having passive income is a nice place to have a decent part of your base. And so as I look to, for example, exactly what that host was doing, building subscribers, building a passive income base, that was for me something that made sense as well, right? So building that, getting that steady foundation, and now introducing it. I have a couple of other providers that I work with as well, who also have interesting and fantastic wine clubs, different memberships, etc. But then building on that with doing more of the corporate events. And in all cases, I've associated with wineries that make sense to associate with, whether it be, of course, the caliber versus the price, price, the organically farmed, family-run wineries, all of those sort of things all tie into what's important to me. But then beyond that, in many cases, it will be that I'm using those wines for the purpose of events, but not always, right? So sometimes I may work with a licensed venue and I don't have the ability to bring in exactly what I would like to for an event, which is completely fine because as I've now built out that event side of the business, it is a lot more flexible in terms of what I do. And it is having conversations with the host. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And the reality is, just from a financial perspective, in some cases, it is completely appropriate and makes sense to, so to speak, rep my wines or the wineries that I represent. So a perfect example of that would be a not-for-profit type of it. Because in those cases, the not-for-profits, they want to keep their costs down and they are very amenable to collaborations. And so if I do an event with many of the not-for-profits, it will be doing a wine dinner or something else where in most cases, they or a donor are buying the wine. I'm working to put together whatever that overall event is. And in many cases also to assist in getting people to the event for my network who makes sense, who I think would identify with a not-for-profit. But then at the end of all of that, the individuals and or donors that are attending, they already know that they're there for a good cause. And inherently, I'm selecting, and it is my best interest to select wines that people are going to enjoy. And then from there, not only are they happy to donate or get involved with the organization if it fits with them, but then also I have the opportunity to sell in to the event and to those individuals. And in almost all cases, I then do a give back to the organization. And so it really ends up being a win-win. And in some cases where the givebacks have exceeded the cost for that organization to do the wine. In other cases where they've had net new donors that they have not had an event before. And then there's clearly a huge benefit. One of the ones that I did about a handful of months ago, there was a new individual. He had not been to events before. He absolutely loved the event, loved the wines. I had great conversations with him too. And immediately afterwards, he had actually made a $5,000 donation. And again, coming from somebody who had never been to an event with that charity before.
Wow. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's great to know you're doing a difference and you're having fun at the same time and enjoying good wine.
Exactly, man. When my family owned a couple retail shops, we did a really nice charity event every year, and it was literally my favorite night of the year. Yeah, we had fun too, but we raised a lot of money for a great cause. So that's cool. So these folks that are attending, I'm just really interested in this. And I love some of the themes that you've run, like the blending. And I just saw something that you posted the other day, which was really neat. Do you find that they're hungry for education about wine? Are they just there to have a good time and drink? Or is it a mix of both? Or how deep do you get on the knowledge part of your presentation?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm still good at from my consulting days is using the answer, it depends. That worked very well then, and it still works in situations like this now, and holds true ultimately. So it really does depend. I've had one law firm, Decker, which is absolutely a fantastic partner to work with, and they've had me do 3 events now. And in doing those events, there are individuals there who are very deep in the wine. There's individuals who really just want to try a glass or potentially try a few different glasses, and really everywhere in between. And right, for me, it's fun when there's a couple of folks there who now have been to a couple or all 3 of the events who are pretty passionate about wine, and they love to have the conversation. For me, I think the difference that is myself versus some other wine educators is having that conversation before the event, understanding what the anticipated outcome is. And in many cases, it really is networking, or it's getting this group of people closer together, or sharing stories, or something other. In many cases, it's not. They want somebody to be able to walk away and be an expert blender or an expert wine rater and those sort of things. And I think the reason that it works out well is reading the room, which generally I'm pretty good at doing, figuring out where people want to be with it, focusing and getting to that point. And yes, I've had cases before where there is somebody who's incredibly knowledgeable on wine. They want to share their knowledge, and then it's just repurposing that in a polite way type of thing. But no, so in the blending sessions, we definitely go through and we have some detailed conversations as to why people are blending. But really, that's their experience of it's me talking all the time, which I can be good at doing sometimes. That's not the intention. It really is having them share. I actually start, when I do the blending sessions, I started out by saying that this is not your typical wine tasting. This truly is an executive decision-making session. And it is true, right? You put in 1% of Petit Verdot into a Bordeaux style blend, it completely changes it. And you're essentially taking 1% of something out, right? It's addition by subtraction. And those are the types of things that tie into the overall broader themes that are interesting, relevant, people will remember, but it's not in many cases going overly into the nitty gritty, which most people don't want.
Yeah, great point. I couldn't agree more. They want enough to be dangerous. They want to know that you know the information, but they don't want to be overloaded with it either. It's a fine line.
Consistently, if I think about what the takeaways are that people care about or they find interesting, it comes down to things that allow them to order a wine at a restaurant and not look stupid. happen. It comes down to topics such as how do I properly serve wine? And as most Americans, and maybe broader than just Americans, but definitely Americans, are drinking their whites too cold and their reds too warm, right? And so when I go with the 20-20 or 30-30 minute rule, depending on kind of what camp you're in, which is you put the red into the fridge for 30 minutes before or 20 minutes, and you take the white out, especially if you're talking a Chardonnay or something that's not as crisp, for 20 or 30 minutes, those are the types of things that resonate. They can take it, they can use it. Or when I ask the group, hey, how do you feel about blends? In a lot of cases, people may think that they're cheap. They may think that it doesn't really make sense. And then when I explain that in the US, 75% of the wine has to be that grape and it can be labeled as such, that just blows their minds, right? And so when I'm tying it into what they're actually producing, for example, one of them had a 75% or 80% Cab Franc and then 20% of the other grapes, which one of the guests did last time. I said, congratulations, you technically have a Cab Franc, at least with how it would be bottled. And it just blew their mind. So those are things they can use.
Yeah, that's such a foreign thing for people. They see Cabernet on the label and they think it's 100% Cab, and
exactly.
Depending on where it's coming from, there's a lot of flexibility there for the winemaker, which is cool. That's really neat. How about any crazy questions that you've been asked, or like when you finish one of these events, how much of the next event comes from someone that attended the event? Because it seems like you've got like a pretty full schedule, man, which is great. So.
Yes, the reality is I do have a lot of repeat offenders. And the good thing is there's different ways to do it. I've actually, in some cases, had individuals who are guests at a prior event, and then I have a future event that's incoming. And that future event actually is very well suited for them and the network they're trying to build. So I've actually had people that have been my volunteers that ultimately it ends up being a mutually beneficial thing for that person to come in and support with the next event, meet people, etc. But it's all the time. A lot of what I do is word of mouth. At the last event that I had, there were a couple of law firm partners, or one of the last events, a couple of law firm partners, and one of them had reached out to their practice lead to basically say, hey, this would be really interesting to do more of these, whether it be internal or client facing in a different setup and setting. So we definitely, those sort of conversations happen all the time. What was interesting, and I won't mention any names here, there's another event that I was introduced to the host, and I learned how the event went down after the fact, and that the person who had made the introduction had been to one of my prior ones, and they had also been to that one, and they're like, they should have probably have gone with you. So I get that kind of feedback too. Again, I want every interaction with wine, whoever's doing it, to be good and positive, interesting, with good takeaways. Those sort of things and name and brand recognition have been really huge for me, honestly.
Yeah, that's neat. I'm just curious, walk me through a typical week. Is it nights? Is it Saturday nights? Is it Sundays? I'm sure if you're at a law firm, it's probably a Thursday night, but overall, like, what's a typical week look like? Or is it just every week is different?
Every week is different because I still do have a lot of roots into my prior life, whether it be in the finance or others. Okay. I'm additionally the president of the Private Directors Association. And so for the folks out there who are familiar with the NACD, this is essentially an organization that does similar things around governance and everything else, but really heavily focused on privately held companies. And so that being the president of the local chapter here, that is in essence another 10 plus events a year, whether they be less formal socials all the way to an IPO event that we did the other day, which had 130 people between online and in person. And so that takes up a decent amount of my time. Typical week, there is not a typical week, but generally speaking, what it involves is one thing that I've done is I've started to protect my Mondays. So Monday from 8 o'clock until, or really morning until noon, I really try to keep that open to catch up. And that's just catch up with anything that's not meetings with people for the most part. But from there, anything is possible, right? So I do a number of connections in person where it could be talking to people about the next event. It could be talking to folks who are sponsors for the Private Directors Association. It could be actually getting work done for CFO or a couple of partnership things that I'm working through. But then most of the night times do include some sort of event. And that might be an event that I'm putting on for the Private Directors Association, which in those cases, to be very fair, I'm not able to incorporate my wines from a conflict of interest perspective. Yeah. But every one of those events essentially gets the attention that a sommelier-led organization would get in those, right? So the food and beverage is always off the hook because that's also my brand. And then there are events that I'm putting on, whether it be a wine blending, wine tasting, that could be from a corporate perspective. It could be related to a not-for-profit, can also be private events. I've done a couple of events on yachts and mansions, which interestingly enough, I thought after I left the Big Four that I wouldn't have to be doing NDAs. And I've had to do NDAs for a couple of those events as well. So it's no taking photos, no publishing, which is unfortunate because some of those events have been incredibly interesting, would be really good from a a social media perspective,
Oh, heck.
and I can't utilize them, which is very unfortunate. So I can talk about it at a high level, but I can't actually talk about the people or specifics.
Yeah.
But yes, it's those. To answer the question on the weekends, you are absolutely correct. Because a lot of what I do is corporate, I will have some events on the weekends. In reality, that ends up being, private wine tastings, or in a lot of cases, it will be utilization of things that I made a donation of to a not-for-profit, or that somebody else has basically purchased the wine piece of it for a not-for-profit. I do the event and I basically donate my time in most of the cases for a not-for-profit.
Got it. Okay. So you're in Massachusetts. Do you go out to the islands? Do you go to like Nantucket or the Vineyard and do anything out there? Have you been out there?
So the Nantucket Wine Festival is coming up at the end of the month.
Yeah.
I have so many other things going on right now that I'm trying to still make that work for at least a day, but we'll see. From an event perspective, though, it's certainly flexible. I've done one fun one was that I was invited to a sailboat with about 10 people, and I said, let's add an impromptu wine tasting. So I brought 6 different wines. We did a wine tasting in addition to the sail, and it was just a lot of fun. And the folks on the sailboat were like, this would be really interesting. Let's talk about how we actually do this for another event, that type of thing. So the word of mouth, that part happens all the time. But yeah, from a location perspective, locally, of course, I have done those, but I've also been asked to do events in Florida, in Chicago, in Pennsylvania now a couple of times. And so I'm pretty flexible from a location perspective.
Cool. And quick things. Would you be open to share a low point in this journey so far?
I think it's interesting because you think that when you do something like this, the way I operate anyways, if I do something, I enjoy it, I'm probably going to engage in a purchase or support whatever. And so what's been interesting is, of course, you have a number of family friends that are wine enjoyers, and you know that they're going and buying or gifting wine. In many cases, I know what they're getting, and the wines that I have are either better or better for a price point, etc., but they don't buy from you. So that's something that I've talked to a number of other business owners, and that's one of the things that for them that they are completely shocked about as well. They don't understand it. So that's been an interesting one for me that I still don't understand. I think
Feel that.
Yeah.
I have family all the time, and they're like, what do you think about the way our will is set up or this or that? I'm like, make an appointment and become a client.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can understand in some cases where somebody might be somewhat resistant just because of the fact that, like, I don't want, if I were going through a divorce or something like that, I wouldn't necessarily want one of my good friends to be the divorce attorney and get into the fold on some of those things. I can a little bit understand that, but wine is the same. Right? And it's not like you're going into a major commitment. Grab a couple bottles, you like them or you don't, but you're probably going to like them because I wouldn't recommend them if I didn't think you were going to. That's been an interesting one. And yeah, I think some of the things just take longer than people think to build. I've just been very lucky that I've had the ability to essentially bring that up and start working through that and really doing more, having the wine as more of a portfolio versus having that be the only thing. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people probably otherwise might do or might consider is going into that. And you've been in the industry before, you have a number of clients who are the same way, where it's not unlike a W-2 type role. There's a lot more unpredictability in this, which is why I've been trying to focus on building that base, more of the passive income. And I've had somewhat more of the ability to do that maybe than the average person jumping out into this.
Cool. Very cool. Great story. All right. Last bottle of wine you had. What was it?
Oh, man. So actually, we had a wine dinner at a restaurant in Southbridge. That is one of my favorites. And there were a number of the wines in there. We had 1988 Burgundy with, I'm failing to remember the producer, but it was quite nice. We had a Chateau Gaffalieri, and I think that was a 2001. But there's really just some interesting older wines.
Wow.
I've been pretty lucky in that regard. Doing what I've been doing lately, I've been doing a lot of tastings related to that and really showcasing the French versus the American styles. That's been a lot of fun.
Love that. That's a great exercise too for your palate. That's really
especially doing it with blind tasting. Yes.
Oh yeah. When I was training for the certified somm test, I was drinking a lot of wine.
Well, what was your last bottle?
So it was, let's see, I grilled steak for me and the kids and the wife, and it was a Malbec from Argentina, just regular, recent vintage. Forget the producer though. It was good. Yeah, like $25 bottle. It was a Thursday night maybe. So
yep. I know we're coming up on time here, so I'll mention one other one so after that dinner, I had also brought one of the brands I'm repping is Dry Creek Vineyard, and I absolutely love them. I love their wines. They put the AVA on the map. They've been now in business for 50 years, which is interesting. Incidentally as well, or 50 plus years. And the wine that I had was a 2021 Endeavor, which is mostly Cabernet. And that was just absolutely beautiful wine. So there were about 8 or 10 of the guests after the wine dinner that I shared that with, and they were all beyond impressed. So
Dry Creek Vineyards Endeavor. I'm going to look that up. Cool.
Endeavor.
Where can people find you and how can they book an experience?
Easiest is Steven at stephenuncorked.wine. So Steven with a PH, email, or certainly go to my website. The phone number is on there, and that's stephenuncorked.wine. But definitely welcome any inquiries. Happy to have a conversation. And just remember, because where there's wine, there's definitely magic. And and it all comes together with that.
I love it. Perfect. Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed it. Great conversation.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Joe.
Thanks so much.